to order the Trinity County Supervisor meeting of December 18th. Mr. Mines, on your last official meeting, would you read us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Supervisor?
If it pleases the chair,
Yes.
you have a moment. I have a subsequent item that has been brought to the attention. I'll make this in the form of a motion also. The requested action is to move and discuss and/or take action on closed session pending litigation, and find that the need to take immediate action came to the attention of the board subsequent to the agenda being posted. The urgency is that it came to the attention of staff after posting and needs action prior to the next board meeting. It's Government Code Section 54954.5(c), conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, number of cases 1.
Okay. Is there public comment on this?
Yes.
Okay.
Not until closed session, right?
No.
It is a closed session.
There's
I
public comment on both.
meant for this.
Public comment on whether it should be received as an urgency item, yes.
Okay. All right, does the public have any comment on this?
Okay, sorry.
Nope, we'll bring it back.
We don't know what it is, but you
Um, So with that,
How do we even know how to comment when we don't even know what the litigant is or whatever? It's just a question mark?
yes.
Yeah, you're supposed to actually put it in your minutes what it is, unless it's just pending litigation. But if it is real litigation, you're supposed to say who the litigants are, just their name, and then what action you decided to take. That's what you're supposed to do. Thank you.
So we stated that it was anticipated, which would be another term for pending. With that, those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? All right. All right, public comment this time for information from the public on matters not appearing on this agenda. All comments are limited to 3 minutes and must pertain to matters within the jurisdiction of this board. When addressing the board, please state your name for the record and address the board as a whole through the chair. No action or discussion will be conducted on matters not listed on the agenda. However, the chair may refer the subject matter to the appropriate department for follow-up or schedule a matter on a subsequent board agenda. Yes, good morning.
Good morning, Kate Graves from Lewiston. This is for someone that didn't feel like showing up. That people would like to know where the stoplight is. There was big to-do about stoplight, and now they're wondering where it is. So I'm just asking for them to you.
Okay, we'll see if we can get a report on that. No other,
Scott Mearson from Hayford. I have a feeling I'm too late. Did you already go over the grading ordinance?
we have not.
Oh, okay.
Gentleman asking Hayfork, I see there's no cannabis on here today. I mentioned once before, and I don't know if you guys have gave any consideration to us, to be able to bring personal grow product into the legal market. If we could be able to buy someone's 6 plants that they're able to grow product and bring it to the legal market so it doesn't float around up out there and end up into the black market. I didn't know if there was a way for that to be handled, if they could get some type of a voluntary type of permit and participate in our program in that aspect. Anyway, thank you very much.
So I'll comment on that in my report.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and the rest of the board. My name is Larry Winter from High Palm. I'm here today to talk about the Trinity Collaborative. I wrote a letter to the editor 2 weeks ago that was published concerning the decision that the Collaborative made to go ahead with the Mad River District, Ranger District project. And my concern was that I was espousing the goals and the principles of Fire Safe Council and was not given a seat at the table in the development of that project. And when I objected to that and tried to present my view, I was shouted down. And what I did mention in that newspaper letter to the editor was that the charter for the Trinity Collaborative allows the public to comment after discussion is over with the collaborative group, but before the vote. Two members of the public tried to make a comment and were refused. They brought up the point that it's in the charter for them to be able to comment, and they were refused again. So this Trinity Collaborative, from my view, is a corrupt group. We have, and let me explain why, also why this should affect you. The safety element under the general plan concerning wildfire risk puts all your eggs in the Trinity County Fire Safe Council's goals. And then you've created a Trinity Collaborative after that that has now supplanted the ability of the Fire Safe Council to put projects before the Forest Service. And that collaborative group is not allowing the Fire Safe Council objectives, goals, the principles behind it to have a seat at the table to create projects. And so I'm laying it at your feet. And what I'm going to do, I'm not letting this rest. I'm going to make an appointment with the CAO to discuss this. And from there, I'm going to go to the grand jury, the county council. I'm already going to be meeting with the forest supervisor, the Shasta Trinity. And I'm going to make an appointment with the forest supervisor at the Six Rivers. Because this status quo has to stop. We're putting our communities at risk by ignoring what the Trinity Collaborative is doing in regards to not allowing people to express their views. And also, the biggest part is that the goals of a county fire safe council, which if you read your MOU you had with it, is an excellent document if we only followed it. We're completely eliminating those goals from the Trinity Collaborative. They're not allowed to speak, not allowed to participate in that project implementation, just the planning of it, which is the goal of a collaborative. Thank you.
Okay. John?
Is this an item that the Board of Supervisors possibly would like to agendize to review our charter or whatever we have with the collaborative, and if we want to continue forward or not, or what's going on, or see what's really going on?
Right.
You know, comment is, or
John, since you and I sit on the collaborative, we've not been as a group, a duo for the collaborative, maybe we'd be willing to sit down with Larry and get more information. I'd start there. I can't ask him questions in
Right.
this forum, but I'm not sure that if you raised it this last collaborative meeting, the afternoon of the collaborative or not, I don't know.
Okay.
So let's certainly sit down with Larry and
And CAO?
sure, yeah.
yes, that's what my recommendation would be, is the three of you sit down and take a look at what's going on.
Yeah.
All right. Any other public comment?
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Tom Belenko, Douglas City. Congratulations on the end of a successful year with the gavel there. And in the board in general, I wanted to just say thank you for the work. I know most of my attention always focuses on the stuff the board has done related to cannabis, but I think we've accomplished a lot this year as a county. It doesn't mean there's not a lot to do, to include today. But I know there's contrasting views about how much or how well we've addressed these issues, and certainly it's well known I haven't agreed with everything that has come forward on the issue so near and dear to my heart. But I do agree with the process we're engaged in, and I think it's been responsive, and there's a lot of diverse views in our community, and I think we have seen this board successfully wrestle with a lot of those views. And I was watching the movie Amistad some weeks ago, and it made me think about our process here, kind of because we studied that case in law school, and it's a ramp up to the Civil War, and we realized that, the Civil War was in the 1860s, but really the positioning was happening decades before that. And I think one of the things that was interesting about the Amistad case is that the lawyer, I suppose you would call it, John Quincy Adams, who argued the case, was a former president, arguing before his former vice president, Roger Taney, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And those two, that was a northerner and a southerner, back in the 1820s, who got together to forestall this tension between North and South all the way back then. The movie shortens into a nice 8-minute block, this touching speech that Anthony Hopkins gives as John Quincy Adams. But the real speech went over 3 days, and including the death of a justice during the speech, so I'm trying to make mine more enlivening. But I thought when I was watching it, there's just a line in there, and I thought, well, give us a sequel. I just was hoping I could encourage us to do something on sequel. And I know a lot of people are saying that, we've got to do an EIR. I think you're going to see some forces challenge that, regardless of what we do. So I encourage us to move forward. And like the dear former president concluded, if there's going to be a civil war, let it come. And let's finish this work. Thank you.
All right, any other public comment? With that, we'll bring it back. All right. Presentations. Item 1.1, receive a presentation from Trinity County Field Representative Aaron Dunn with Assembly Member Jim Wood's office regarding end of year wrap-up.
Yes. Hi, good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board and the public. Thank you for your service to Trinity County and the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Aaron Dunn, and I'm here representing Assembly Member Jim Wood. 2018 was, at best, a tumultuous year. We began the year as we ended it, recovering and rebuilding from devastating wildfires. In the past 14 months alone, we lost 122 lives and nearly 28,000 structures, many of them family homes. Assemblymember Wood is committed to doing whatever he can to help protect life and property. To that end, I'd like to mention the first bill he introduced for the 2019-2020 legislative season. The bill is just in the beginning stages of development and of course will be refined throughout the legislative process and subject to debate and conversation with many stakeholders. It's known as AB 38. It creates state and regional community fire preparedness councils. The state councils will be responsible for reviewing and approving the activities of the regional councils, and it will establish best practices for emergency alert and evacuation procedures and standard construction requirements to prevent or mitigate fire damage that would be required beginning January 1, 2024. The regional councils in the higher fire severity zones will develop community wildfire protection plans and vegetation management ordinances, among other things. It also creates the state's first hardened homes revolving loan fund of $1 billion to be used for no or low interest loans for homeowners to harden their homes against fire with fire resistant siding and roofing and vegetation management, for example. To respect your time, I'll speak briefly about some of his 2018 legislation by category: healthcare, wildfires and rebuilding, and the environment, wrapping up with significant accomplishments from this legislative season. You can find all of his legislation dating back to 2015 on his website a02.asmdc.org. In healthcare, he successfully passed bills to regulate and demand transparency of the business practices by the pharmacy benefit managers, or the middlemen, who negotiate drug prices between pharmaceutical firms and the healthcare plans. Big Pharma and PBM industry fought hard but unsuccessfully against the bill. It ensures that prescriptions of Epidiolex, a new FDA-approved CBD-based drug to treat rare forms of epilepsy, primarily in children, can be written by licensed prescribers. And to just expand on that a little, because it is an FDA-approved pharmaceutical, it can only be filled by a licensed pharmacy, not in a cannabis dispensary. Create a state council to develop and plan and achieve universal coverage through a unified financing healthcare system by October 2021, with updates in 2020. Create a council to determine the feasibility of offering a public health insurance option like Medi-Cal to the public. Earlier this year, Assemblymember Wood and his colleagues introduced a $1 billion package of bills to address the goal of expanding health care to all. Unfortunately, most of those bills did not move forward, primarily because of their cost to the state, which will be a continuing challenge. The U.S. comprises 5% of the world's population, but we consume 99% of the hydrocodones and 85% of the oxycodones, which is astounding. Sadly, 3 of the counties he represents are in the top 10 for overdoses. Humboldt is number 2, Mendocino number 3, and Del Norte number 8. And notably, many of those overdoses are happening in older people. He successfully passed bills to allow prescribers to offer co-prescriptions for naloxone, a drug that can reverse effects of an overdose, to patients at high risk for opioid overdose. Require electronic prescribing by 2021 to reduce doctor shopping and fraudulent prescriptions and poor prescriber handwriting. To address the devastating wildfires in the rebuilding process, he successfully passed bills to help homeowners find insurance companies that will write policies that offer more than 100% coverage. Make it illegal for landlords to price gouge, which we saw happening immediately after the fires. They can't increase the monthly rental price for residential housing to a tenant by more than 10% of the pre-disaster fair market price, and also makes it illegal to evict a tenant during the declared disaster period. Help schools that suffered damage or were closed after the fires by replacing average daily attendance, by allowing schools to apply for funding to make up for those losses for up to 3 years. Allow an extension of building permit process. The demand for construction services and the significant impact this has on local building and planning departments makes complying with existing timeframes impossible for many. The implementation of Prop 64 has had many fits and starts. It's been a bumpy road. Governor Brown's administration was difficult to read on cannabis policy, and many bills attempting to address some of the challenges were held in committee. The current regulations have been painful for many, especially the small farmers and businesses. Perhaps the newly elected governor will have a different approach. We'll see. And to wrap up, some of the more significant accomplishments of the legislature include a state budget signed with record reserves, including investing more than $1.2 billion to kickstart housing construction and shelter the homeless, expanding aid to family in needs with more than $360 million every year targeted to lift children out of deep poverty, increasing the earned income tax credit to help 2 million working class households meet their needs, and building record reserves of nearly $16 billion as safeguard against uncertainty. Other legislative accomplishments include passing the nation's strongest net neutrality law to ensure Californians continue to benefit from free and open internet, passing landmark internet privacy protections to give consumers unprecedented control over their personal information online, passing nation-leading workplace harassment and sexual misconduct reforms, passing Senate Bill 901, which revamps our disaster response and preparedness protocols, builds a new framework to strengthen our electrical grid, and protect ratepayers from bearing the brunt of the costs. It also includes $1 billion over a 5-year period for vegetation management, something he fought for in this bill. Making California the first major economy on the planet to commit to 100% clean energy by the year 2045. Passing legislation to prevent new offshore drilling, to protect our coasts and local economies and ecosystems that depend on them. And finally, Senate Bill 1, which withstood repeal at a repeal effort, and although not popular with everyone, is sorely needed. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you today, and let me know if there are any questions I can take back to the Assembly member.
Congratulations. This is your second term, Hillary?
Yes. Yes.
Did you get your cards done?
Yeah, I've got them in my pocket, so anybody who would like a card, I do have them today.
You give them 5 to Tina for 6. I will do that. I don't at the moment. Thank you, though.
No,
All
no.
right.
It's great
Get
to be
ready,
here
though.
today.
Yeah. I will. After the first of the year.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you then.
I would like you to relay on to the Assemblyman that you're in discussions anyway about our jail and the increased cost.
Yes.
And so we would really appreciate any support that the Assembly can do on that to help us afford the new jail that we're working on.
I have shared that with him, and I've read the articles in the paper and spoke with your CAO about it last time I was here. So it's definitely on their radar, and let us know how we can help with that.
I do have something to take back.
Okay?
So obviously, we're in the world of fire the last few years, and fires cross county lines, and it doesn't respect county lines. And when it crosses a county line, that county, and I think you saw it in Lake County, we experienced with Car Fire, we are not put into the emergency, not response, but recovery. And so maybe he could look at something to do with that. We certainly have things in the recovery process that we will not get help from the state, but more importantly, the residents will not get help with cleanup, et cetera. So we're not the only county that experiences that, and we're seeing it more and more as fires, aren't going to look at county lines when it's out of control. So
I will definitely take that back to him. I mean, it was unprecedented what happened, and I think everybody's trying to figure out exactly how to do that, so I will take that back to him.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 1.2, receive a presentation from Emergency Service Operation Manager Ed Presley regarding the 2018 fire season. No fiscal impact. Ed.
Have printouts of the slides. Okay, if you like those. There's also some for the public on the table if you would like. Morning, sir.
Good morning.
I think I would like to start off by saying this year was kind of unprecedented. This was our first year of going through a complete fire season with HHS, and I think we do have a lot of things that we learned from this season. But this will just be a short presentation to kind of give everybody an idea of what we experienced and the type of statistical data that we keep up with in an abbreviated format of SURE. So I was hunting up above French Gulch, and I was in the ash, and me and my daughter's boyfriend were out there hunting, and I saw this oak tree growing up out of the ash, and it just really struck me. It seems like every fire season we kind of have the same thing going on. We can get surrounded by different things that happen to us, but we will recover and we will move on. And every year we get stronger. So what we're going to do is just take a look at the 2018 fire season at a glance. If anybody has any questions or anything, just please let me know. So what I started this year was I started documenting and numbering the fires that were actually response required above and beyond just the normal forestry service or forest service responding, and CAL FIRE responding, and our local fire departments responding. I think this is important just to see those that do breach a known threshold, but also there's a whole bunch of fires that take place out there very, very commonly all the time. There are weeks where we have 2 or 3 fires going around the county, but they just get taken care of and it never actually reaches this threshold because they don't have to reach out for extra support. But I'll be looking at 18-1, which was the Great Fire out by High and Palm. 18-2 was the Flat Fire in Douglas City. 18-3 was the Car Fire in Lewiston. 18-4 was the Delta Fire in Trinity Center, and Curlin Fire is 18-5. So the Great Fire started, and it started over in Humboldt County, came over into our county. The burn time was from 24 April up to May 5th. Burned about 244 acres, and sheltering was on standby for that. And I make that distinction because sometimes we actually go on standby to implement a shelter, open a shelter, but we don't actually open a shelter. It's kind of case-by-case basis. 18-2 is the Flat Fire in Douglas City. It was out at Blanchard Flat Road in Reading Creek. It burned from June 29th until it was completely contained on July 6th. It burned about 300 acres. Sheltering was on standby as well for that one. We did have an evacuation order, and we did use Code Red to get that out to complement our Sheriff's Department going out and doing evacuations, but we didn't receive anyone. The big one of the year was the Car Fire. From July the 23rd to August the 11th. It was 100% contained on September 4th. There were still hot spots. Even when I was up there hunting, which was even later, I still saw tree stumps that were still burning their roots in the ground, so we got to remain vigilant during those times. But it went 229,651 acres. We sheltered evacuees from French Gulch first. I actually received a phone call from Andy Riling, CAL FIRE Battalion Chief. And so we opened up our shelter, and first it was open in Weaverville, and shout out to Kay Poberco, who really helped us out at the elementary school there. And then when it moved over to the high school, Jamie Green was absolutely instrumental. Both people, I did take it upon myself as OES to go out and coin them for their help and for their concern and for their support. It was really instrumental for the evacuees. And then Lewiston also was evacuated, at least partially, so we received those residents over there as well. I'll save the power outage comments till the end because those definitely impacted a lot of people. 18-4 was the Delta Fire, and that was up in Trinity Center. It burned from September 5th to containment on October 7th. But basically September 5th to September 22nd was the time that was really affecting us, and we were really watching it closely. Burned 63,311 acres. Sheltering was on standby, but we could have opened one at any time. I'm also going to save the comments about the animal sheltering to the end as well, because that's a two-faceted, two-pronged approach. OES doesn't control the animal sheltering. That's through the animal control officer with the sheriff's office, but there are two prongs to every fire when we have evacuations. The last one that we had, thank goodness, was Curling Creek Fire over in High and Palm from September 4th to September 15th. This one was actually going on simultaneously with the Delta Fire, so there was some overlap, and that was an interesting situation to have two real fires that were burning acreage in the county going on at the same time. So that kind of stretched us and challenged us and taught us some things as well. It ended up burning 1,751 acres, and then we opened a shelter at Solid Rock Christian Fellowship there in Hayfork. So overall, what we learned was that power outages, they absolutely complicate matters. We need to stay calm, cool, and collected, and we need to get the job done. This is from an OES standpoint as well. This is the way I briefed my team. And then again, the EOC trainings will start up again in January of 2019 because we need to make sure that we have that depth of base that people could come in. For instance, while Lewiston was evacuated, there were people that actually were reporting to the EOC and working for the EOC that were actually evacuated while they were doing it. And so that was just a commendable effort, and they didn't, take off and run out of town. They actually just showed up to work, and they let us know what was going on. So it was really good to see that. That's dedication. This is our home. This is where we live. So there's times where we need to really think about those things. Sheltering is absolutely critical. The evacuations for the Carr, Delta, and Curlin fires, we learned a lot about those. Hence, we are setting up a sheltering team so that we have DSWs that can be contacted and be put on notice. And so we do need a shelter put up. We have dedicated trained personnel that are able to get out there and get the shelter set up and running. The way the sheltering works is the first 3 days, we have to set it up, maintain it, man it, make sure everything is good. And then at about that 72-hour mark, Red Cross actually comes in and takes over the shelter. That's critical because that means we have to be able to feed personnel, we have to be able to take care of the showering needs and take care of just basic needs before the actual professionals come in from the Red Cross and set up and take over. The animals, the large and small animals, can overwhelm facilities. There were points where I was getting briefs from Cal OES, which this is the way it is when you're dealing with this on a community level. How many lizards were being taken care of, how many turtles were being taken care of, how many kittens, how many cats, how many dogs, how many puppies. This is the real world. We don't just get to leave all our pets behind and just hope that they make it. There has to be a place for them. So moving forward, we're working with animal control. I know Christine retired, but we are making contact with a new person who's also named Christine. And we'll hopefully be seamless moving forward. But I also wanted to put out there as well is that we have, in Butte County, we have it's called North Valley Animal Sheltering. So they actually can, I think it's in Butte County anyways, they can come up and help us respond to movement of any large animals in the area as well. Because I know there's a considerable amount of people that have horses and livestock. Not everybody owns 15 horse trailers or have time to really do that. So that's something we're going to be digging into a little bit deeper here in the springtime. I think that's about it unless there are any questions. I know there's probably a handful at least.
Supervisor.
Yeah, thank you. Just thank you again, and I'd like to take a moment to thank all the employees who did volunteer and for all those days, and it was nonstop, it was all fire all August, so thank you again.
Thank you. That's all you can really say. I think we're learning the fire situation is out of control, and there's going to have to be some adjustments made in the management of our forest.
Absolutely, sir. I completely agree.
You did a great job. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. It was absolutely perfect. And look forward to the continued great work.
Do you have any comments about Code Red and how it was effective? I know when we were evacuated, we got it, and that's the first time I think it's been used countywide.
Right. I mean, the one thing that I would point out about Code Red is that what we do is I'll actually go into the computer system and draw a circle or a square or, just try to define the neighborhoods that I'm being recommended as sending out the evacuation notice to. And when I do that, a lot of times I will make the space that I'm sending those messages to just a little bit bigger to account for any overlap. So when I do that, and anytime anybody receives a Code Red message, please understand that the verbiage is absolutely critical. And one of the takeaways that I had from this fire season specifically, because there was a little bit of confusion at times, the difference between an advisory and a mandatory evacuation, and then some people, they would receive the message and just think, it applies to me and this means I have to evacuate, and they don't really listen, they don't, these are disasters. These are people in emotional moments in their lives, and when they've seen it on TV and they think that could be them, or if they get that phone call, they naturally react, in a way that you would think. So what we're going to do this time around, and this was one of those best practices I think we're carrying forward, I'm going to let Cal OES know that we're doing this, is when we give out that verbiage in a phone call, we're also gonna be posting it on our website and on the Facebook page so that people actually see the verbiage as well. And then you can sign up for the app on the phone and you can get the verbiage, but if you don't listen to the phone call, and some people don't actually listen to the words, I mean, there was some confusion with that. So I just want to give them another place, like on a sandwich board, the website, so that when we do send out these messages, they can say, okay, well, let me double check exactly what this was, and then get the message again.
Okay, thank you, Don.
You might want to contact or stay in contact with RCRC. I'm not quite sure who's taking care of it over there. Maybe Richard will know. Every county has a problem with code red getting the information out. It's not only Trinity. Code red, as far as I'm concerned, is not the best thing in the world. People have to sign up for it. But RCRC is looking at making a concerted effort for the rural to try and set up some type of emergency information to be put out in each county. You cannot rely on code red. You cannot rely on reverse 911, and especially in this county. And you might want to look at bringing in the CD people to, get everybody working and talking.
Right, and one of the other things that's going to be online this year as well is CPUC, California Public Utilities Commission, is really, pushing out the 211 usage. So that's another thing that we're told is going to be online by May, and we're hopeful for that. That'll give anyone in the county the ability to just call and get information.
When you dial 211 now?
Not right now.
Exactly.
May. So hopefully pre-fire season that will be in place, and they're actually going to pay for the infrastructure, the switches, and then give us the training so that we'll be able to know how to input the information. And then the call center, they would be in charge of manning the call center, getting it set up for us to use.
Please don't trust it, and make sure that it kind of works first before somebody dies.
I hear what you're saying.
Thank you.
Supervisor Morris?
And you're also looking into the WIA system. So
Yes.
that's a federal alert system that people don't have to opt into, my understanding.
Correct.
So you're close to having that up.
Right.
I know
There's-
it's a bunch of hoops. But
Yes, there was a bunch of hoops, but I'm at the very tail end of that. And we are, actually, as Trinity County, we do have this now. We do have our number, we have our designation from FEMA, from the federal government, saying that we are a recognized hub for IPAWS, the Integrated Public Alert Warning System. So all it is getting that integrated into our Code Red system now. And that would allow anybody that's traveling through that has a cell phone to receive these messages on the go. So to me, that was something that we really, really need for the county.
Okay. Ed, thank you very much for all your work.
Thank you, Ed.
Okay, item 1.3, receive a presentation from Trinidad Insurance Fund, Executive Director Dave Hinson regarding Trinidad Fund Joint Powers Authority, and approve the restated and revised Trinidad Insurance Fund Joint Powers Agreement, no fiscal impact.
Good morning, Chair, board members. I'm David Nelson, the Executive Director of Trinidad Insurance Fund. Like you said, I'd like to give you guys a brief overview of what it is we provide for our members and how we interact with the employees of your county. First off, Trinidad was created in 1980 by two gentlemen. One was Bill Folan from Del Norte County, and the other was our own Jack Larkin here in Trinity County. And they were the auditor controllers from their respective counties. And in the hard market of 1980, they couldn't buy insurance. So they decided, hey, why don't we take our money that we budgeted for insurance and let's put it into a bank account. And if you have losses, we pay it out, we'll take it out of there. If I have it, we'll take it out of there. And hopefully at the end of the year, we'll still have money left over. Well, lo and behold, there wasn't any big losses in those first couple of years, and Trinidad, where the JPA was born. So today, JPA is obviously still going strong, and we provide members with the most the most cost-effective risk financing mechanisms for liability, property, workers' comp, pollution, med-mal, and other casualty programs. We do this, we manage these programs to ensure fiscal soundness, superior service, stability of cost, and effective loss prevention and education programs for the public, the county, and employees' needs. So that's kind of like the brief intro to Trindle and how we started and what we do. But I want to talk a little bit about the organization and the success that we've had over the years. So today we have 11 different members, and you can see it on the graph where they're located. And I attribute our success to the fact that the organization is member-driven. So as you guys know, you appoint one person from your county and an alternate to sit on our board and direct what we do. So that really gives us what we abide by on a day-to-day basis. So we're very much member-driven. The other component that makes us so successful, other than being member-driven, is the fact that we all have similar demographics. So the membership is all pretty much the same. You see, they're rural counties. We deal with a lot of the same issues. We have struggles with federal funding, state funding, all the same issues that you guys talk about here. All the members have the same thing, whether it be the risks with pension liabilities, overhead liabilities. We're all dealing with the same thing. And so when we're coming together and dealing with stuff, we create things to help to finance these risks that come towards your county. So that's the main reason for us being so successful, I believe, over the years. I mentioned briefly, I skimmed over, it was the risk financing mechanisms, but what I've created to handle the risks that come towards your county and the other 10 out there is financing mechanisms to handle those costs and claims that come towards you. So the way we deal with that is we've created a self-funding mechanism, that first layer from $1 to a certain level. And what self-funding really is a bank account at Trindle. So Trinity County has a bank account at Trindle where its funds are sitting, and when we have claims against the county, we pay it out of that bank account. There's no commingling of funds. So that becomes really important in that, if you don't have a lot of claims one year, you have leftover money, it comes back to you. And the opposite is true as well, and it'll impact your premiums going forward. But there's a built-in incentive there. It's actually your money in the game. The next mechanism that we use is the risk sharing mechanism. So what that is, when claims get larger, they're less frequent. So we have less frequency but higher severity. And any of those claims that can hit your county can really impact your budget. So what we do is we spread that risk amongst all the members and we share that risk. So in doing that, we lower the risk for any individual county, but we all sharing the costs above that self-funding level. So what that does is give you a more predictable model, and we can budget more, better for those types of things. And then in the worst case scenario, if there's catastrophic losses, we do buy insurance for coverage much higher than that. So this model is used regardless of what policy we're working with. And the things that, I guess, the thing to take away from this is those layers are in concept, but they're not static all the time. So if we have a hard market and let's say insurance is really hard to get again, we would expand either the self-funding part of it or the pooling piece of it, the sharing piece of it, to limit the exposure to that hard market. And the alternative is true from year to year. We'll look at it if insurance is a soft market and we'll shrink the others and expand that one. Do whatever's most cost effective. Okay. The other component to Trindle that we're very proud of is our loss prevention program. And this goes hand in hand. So when we talk about the self-funding piece and saving money, the only way really to save that money is to avoid the losses in the first place, right? So we take a particular interest in avoiding those losses, and that's what our loss prevention program is all about. So we have 4 individuals at our office that visits each one of the members at least once every month. And when they're visiting you, they're giving safety trainings, they're giving leadership trainings, doing inspections, evaluations, helping with policies, doing whatever we can to help you guys avoid any of these losses that may come your way. There are things that the department's doing is taking your loss prevention specialists in each county and your HR folks, and we bring them together to one location 3 times a year. And we give them continuing education on their respective jobs to help them combat some of the issues that they come across. And we do that as well with some other components within the county. So the department safety reps, so each department has a safety officer as well. And so the last, I think we've done it for 2 years now, we've brought in some of your department safety reps together with the other 11 counties, just department safety reps. This is a rather large meeting, anywhere from 80 to 100 people in the room. But we give them tools and things to bring back to their departments to help the safety overall in their respective counties. And that seems to be really, really beneficial to get the word out. Law enforcement, our sheriff folks, probation, we pull them together, all 11 counties, sit them around the table, give them professional development as well. Just continuing education, and there's some synergy that happens when you get people that have the same job from similar counties and get around the table. They all have those problems that they've dealt with, or maybe one has dealt with it and the other one hasn't. They get to share stories, and then when they go back to their counties, you know, when they have that issue, they don't have any problem picking up the phone and asking the next door neighbor county to say, hey, how do you deal with this? What's the best way to go about it? So there is some synergy about, but along with the education. We also do this with the roads department, and more recently, county council. So we brought the county council folks together from all 11 counties, and we do professional development with them as well. So we're trying to come at all angles to educate our employees and our staff to act professionally and safely and to avoid claims. So if we do have a claim against the county or an injured worker, it gets past our loss prevention efforts, we do have folks in the office to deal with that. So we've got, you know, they have the financing mechanism to back it up, but we have folks in our office to help that out. So if you employee here has an injury, we have folks in the office, whether it's first aid, whether it's, you know, medical treatment, lost time, or even future medical treatment. We have individuals that's going to walk that employee through the process to help them get better, faster, more to be productive and back to work. And also on the liability side, if we have a claim against the county for something, we have an adjuster in our office as well that's going to do the investigations of that, try to determine liability, you know, whether we want to defend this or whether we want to settle and go through that process. So, to summarize, Trinidad, we're a joint powers authority, 11 rural counties, member-driven. We use our risk financing mechanisms that we created to get the best cost-effective scenario for each one of our counties. We have a loss prevention program that's out there and an awesome claims handling department to handle it. Is there any questions? I know I went through that really fast. We have a lot on the agenda today, so I was trying to hurry up.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time. We also have a JPA agreement in front of you that has some revisions. But get that approved as well.
Are you going to go over those revisions? Or
I don't believe, I believe, is Shelley going to go over them? If
I can
you have
go.
any questions regarding.
I can go over them. So the first revision on the JPA agreement is on page page 7, Article 4, paragraph C and D. So essentially what this is about is Trindle recently decided to do the risk-sharing pools themselves. We were part of a risk-sharing pool with CSAC EA, which is a much larger pool within the state of California. And we saw the benefits that our losses are actually a little better, so we've decided to pool our own, with our own members outside of that pool to get advantage in pricing. So these two items speak to that, basically creating risk-sharing pools in order to garner assets to do that. So that was the first change. The second one is on page 8. And this is something that's required by the government code of JPAs to have within their agreement, and that is a successor agency that if the Trindle board is unable to make decisions on any items, the only thing I can think of is if it was dissolved and there wasn't anybody else to make a decision, there has to be an agency that can make the final decision, and we've named Del Norte County that stepped up for that. So those are the only two revisions to this JPA agreement from the previous one.
Okay, so this is basically a two-part, we have a presentation, but now we have an approval.
Where is that?
Well, it says, and approve the restated and revised Trinidad funds under 1.3, but I would like council to weigh in on appropriateness of having a presentation / approval. Is this,
I did look it up because I had the same questions, but it was agendized in an appropriate manner to take action at this time. I believe in the future we'll maybe divide them into 2 items, but it still meets the requirements of the Brown Act for this today.
thank you. All right, any further questions on this? On the approval side of it? Okay, we'll open it up to the public. If the public has any questions on the approval of the JPA changes?
Kate Graves from Lewiston. Is there any changes made to whether a county can remain in Trindle if somebody, for whatever reason, a county is dropped? Is that included, or should it be included in a revision? Thank you.
Go ahead and answer that question.
I can speak to that. So there's been no change.
And go ahead and focus on us.
Okay, so there's been no changes to the JPA agreement, whether an entity can withdraw from Trindle or join Trindle. Those rules still are the same. I think that pretty much covers it.
Okay. Any other public comment? All right, with that, we'll bring it back.
Motion to approve the JPA as presented for Trindle.
Second.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? All right, passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, we're on to a consent calendar. These items include routine, non-controversial matters that may be acted upon by the board by one roll call motion. A member of the board, staff, or public may request an item to be pulled and considered separately. Supervisor Mines.
Nothing.
Supervisor Chadwick.
2.5 and 2.6.
5 and 6. Supervisor Morris.
Yep.
I'm going to pull 2.4. All right. Yes.
And Diane Richards from Hayfork, I request that you pull 4.5, please.
That's on there. That's not on the consent.
I thought it was.
It's not.
Oh, okay. Could that then be brought up before some of the others, because a lot of people here
We'll
are for that?
wait until we do that.
All right, thank you.
Any other from the public and then staff? Okay. Entertain a motion.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Supervisor Fenway?
Yes.
Supervisor Morris?
Yes.
Supervisor Chadwick? Supervisor Mines?
Yes.
Supervisor Brooks?
Aye. All right, first item up is 2.4. I will recuse since this is an alcohol issue, and I'll let Vice Chair read that.
Okay, item 2.4, find that the proposed license will meet the public convenience and necessity, and find no objections to the issuance of a wine grower license to Cavallado Vineyard Estate LLC for Cavallado Vineyard Estate at 3995 Campbell Ridge Road, Sawyer, California, 95563. No fiscal impact. Board members, any questions? Members of the public? Comments, questions? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board.
I will move to make a motion to pass item 2.4 ABC application for the wine grower.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so moved. Thank you. On that item?
Is it gonna be quite a while before they deal with the grading ordinance?
Not that long.
Huh?
It shouldn't be that long before we get to that item. So,
Hour?
And you can also request that it be moved up.
but we, heard that it was gonna possibly get moved up, so just give it a few minutes.
Thank you, Scott.
All right, on to item 2.5, approve agreement with Megabyte Property Tax System, MPTS, to provide property tax assessment systems and annual maintenance, approximately $753,000 to purchase a system and first-year maintenance cost of system budgeted in assessor's office in 2018-19 budget. Bobby, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you, Shannon. This looks very exciting, and do you have access to, so I think it might be easier if I just go to the pages that they were at. There's one question, and it says that there's an attorney. I guess this would be more for Margaret. When I was reading it, I didn't see it in the backup where normally there's signatures. So I'm assuming that you read it, and the contract identifies that it has to be approved by our attorney. So I'm
That's correct. The
It
new
just-
system we have in place allows us to do it electronically, approve of it, so it wouldn't be on the agenda if it hadn't gone through all the requisite individuals who need to sign off on it, which would be county council, the CAO, the auditor's office, and risk management, so that we all have reviewed it.
okay. So I hadn't seen it, and that's a new program, so that's why I wasn't. That's great. So that takes care of that. It says that it's user-friendly, and I'm wondering if that's the public. Is the public going to be able to pay online and access their own stuff, or is the user just the county?
Well, for the system, the user is the county. It's a module, a software system for the assessor's office, the auditor, and the tax collector. So it would depend what Terry would decide to do for paying online. That is not a function of the assessor's office at all.
Right. So we have the potential then as one of the additional modulars to purchase an online payment?
I do believe there is a system that you can pay online.
Okay. And then there was page 204, I'm sorry you don't have it in front of you, of the whole packet. It says the results, and in the way they did it, they spread out the days that it takes to process the different things, and I'm assuming that those are overlapping. They're not like X amount of days for one thing. You could do these at the same time.
So I'm sorry, Bob, you're going to tell me where you're at.
Yeah, I don't know. It's in the backup, and it talks about.
So it's part of the licensing agreement?
Yeah.
Okay, so what page number?
If you want to come up here so you can
I
see.
have the licensing agreement.
Okay, so on
you can
Exhibit
get the
B,
page.
project plan, project
Okay.
timelines.
Yep.
Phase 1, general design analysis, 60 days. Phase 2, the data conversion is 75, which is the longest. I'm assuming those are layered. They're not staggered out. So it's not 60 days and then 75, and then these are contiguous.
The plan would be to go live by the end of this fiscal year.
Okay. But that answers actually I think the last question I had. So by the end of this fiscal year, so we're looking at
June 30th, the end of the
Yes.
fiscal year, yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're
That's
welcome.
great, thank you. That concludes my questions.
We did have Terry in the audience if you wanted to request her to come up and answer that question.
Thank you, Chair, I appreciate that.
Yes.
Terry, I'm very excited about this system, primarily because I think the workload is going to decrease, hopefully, for staff, but also the transparency and the access for the public. It looks like the potential for people to get online, and there is a modular. Are you hoping that at some point the public will be able to access it online?
We actually currently already have some of those features available online. We have certain government codes that prohibit the names online. So for elected officials and law enforcement and things like that. So in order to comply with that government code, so you do have the availability to look online, you just don't have the availability to see a person's name. And the assessor's office also currently, they have had since as long as I've been with the county that I'm aware of, that they've always had public access in their office. So those things have been available, and we plan on continuing that. And currently, we do have the availability to pay with the credit card. And so that is something that there'll be a little bit of changes with the new system, but we are extremely excited about this because we believe this will create efficiencies all the way around for, it'll benefit the public significantly because from my, what my counterparts are saying that have the system now, that they're having extremely, it's shortened, by even weeks or months, the time that it takes to do some of the processing. So I personally am really excited.
So it'll keep what we have and improve going forward. Is what you're
Absolutely.
saying. Okay, that's great. I appreciate that.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Any public comment on this? Nope. All right, we bring it back.
I'd be happy to make a motion to approve.
Second. Mr. Fulford.
We'll give it to Ms. Morris. Quicker on the gun. All right. All those signify by saying aye.
Aye.
In favor? Opposed, same sign. All right, item 2.6, approve a budget approve a budget adjustment for fiscal year 18-19 in the health department, increasing transfers in and fixed assets by $24,000. Approve a budget adjustment 2018-19 in the tobacco program department, increasing transfers out by $24,000. Increase in general fund appropriations, the amount of $24,400. Current cash balance in tobacco program fund is $155,079. Bobby, again, you have a
Yeah,
question?
and I apologize for not emailing this. I didn't think about it until this morning when I realized Subaru. So the Roderick Center in Hayfork had a program set up with Subaru that for purchases, and if you went with the Reading one, I believe was a benefit towards the Roderick. There was a donation. So I meant to email you that and I didn't. So I don't know if the program is still going, but if it is, I just would like you to be aware. Thank you. That's all, sir.
Okay. Would somebody, oh no, I'm sorry, we gotta go. Any public comment on this item? Okay, we'll bring it back.
I'll move to accept as written.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor of signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, we'll move on to reports from department heads. Is Rick in the room? Rick, here's a question for you. So we'll do it on department heads here. Rick, there was a question earlier, and it's been bantied around town a little bit. So the stoplight, when's it going to be erected, and where are we at on that?
Actually, I was hoping to bring the change order to you this meeting, but Caltrans had notified us a couple days ago that there was something else they wanted to change on the plan, so we're just talking with them, but we're looking at getting it in. There's a long lead time on poles, especially since they're decorative type, so we're looking at getting them in right around the late spring timeframe.
So that would be June?
Yeah, May, June, or May-ish.
Okay. And one of the holdups has been that Caltrans,
We've been going back and forth. Probably one of the biggest issues is that when Lance Gulch was designed, it was designed to the 2014 Caltrans specifications and the 2012. And now they want that 2016. There was some significant changes in the electrical parts of that design, so we had to go back and redo that.
okay, so we still have money to cover that, the upgrades?
That's most of them, yes. I'm talking with them about some of that right now.
Okay. Any other questions, Rick?
No, I'll just wait for that item to come forward when it comes. I do have a separate question.
So we'll have it in time for snow by next year? I'm joking, just.
Maybe beach weather, but.
Okay. Oh, beach, okay.
Rick, perhaps the next meeting, if we could get an update on the Helena fire in terms of those who've been rebuilding, what building permits you're seeing, many. I'd just like an update on what recovery on the housing structures and inventory.
Okay, I don't have exact numbers, but I know it's.
Yeah.
I'd asked Jim earlier, and he told me about 20 to 30% right now, but
Have
I'll
submitted
go and
building
get
permit.
actual
Okay.
numbers for you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Rick? All right, thank you, Rick. Any other department heads?
Chair, I just have a brief update, a code enforcement update. I'll provide you a full code enforcement update once the numbers have finalized. We still have a couple things that are pending, and so the numbers aren't finalized at this point. But I can tell you that in this 2018, 90 citations were issued related to cannabis items. There was a number of additional citations that were issued that were non-cannabis related as a result of individuals code enforcement being out there, but related to cannabis, there was 90. Of those, all of them self-abated except for 44 of them. Of those 44, 24 are currently in active litigation related to getting abatements done, and most of them have actually gone through the court process and gotten a preliminary injunction on them, and we're waiting for the finalized process. And the remaining 20, we're waiting for re-inspections on that, meaning their time hasn't elapsed, or the code enforcement officers haven't get out there to do the re-inspection. Once those re-inspections are done, if they haven't self-abated, we'll file the report with those and proceed forward. And I'll be able to provide you some finalized numbers regarding the whole process, probably within about February, we'll get all our numbers in.
Could we also, when you get those final numbers, give us a standpoint, how many of those have been in the last 60 days versus the first 9 months?
Oh, absolutely, and I can actually, if you give me one moment, do that now, because I have that on my chart. So, a majority of them have been within the last 60 days. As of, I'll give you a date, as of August 1st, we only had 30. So 60 of them have been done since August 1st.
Okay, so it's fair to say there's been a change in code enforcement ticket writing in the past.
Correct, and since,
60 days.
and since the new sheriff has come in, it's been an explosion.
I guess that's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
That's what you were fishing for.
I know, I'll just say that, yes, that they put a lot of effort and individuals that have the ability to have to go to it.
Any other questions for Margaret? Richard, do you have anything?
Nothing to report.
Supervisor Mines, do you have anything to report?
No, sir.
Supervisor Penley.
Out of county travel, RCRC for December 5th. Out of county travel.
Supervisor Chadwick.
Out-of-county travel, RCRC on December 5th, and then we met with the opioid committee and also the PATS committee, and a lot of momentum in both those committees going forward into the next year. And the opioid is multi-Trinity agencies and collaborative. It's growing. That's it.
Okay. Supervisor Morris.
Forest Task Force meeting with Sacramento. I took it by phone, but it would have been in Sacramento, but took it by phone that time. Also, I would like to take a moment to just thank Supervisor Mines for his service this past year. This is your last meeting. Thank you for serving your district and the county.
Okay, I had out of county into beautiful Reading for the TMC meeting, which one day was canceled due to a day of mourning, which happened to be the refinement date. So there will be a new refinement date, which is significant since that's what is may or may not change this makeup of TMC. All right, ad hocs, state cannabis legislation.
Okay. Judy, there was something that came up.
Yes, there. I think we're going to mine out here.
I got a notice from the state.
Yeah, so there's some the proposed amendments to the emergency regs. As we know, those came out in July. This past year has been rulemaking it with the state, and they will be fine-tuning them. I think public comment is over on the current proposed regs. It's in front of the Administrative Law Office for review. We'll probably know what lasts after the first of the year, what stands or doesn't stand of their proposal. Is that what you were referring to?
That and the SB 51, that is financial institutions regarding cannabis.
Oh, did that get signed?
No.
Okay.
It's on the 1920.
Gotcha, right, okay.
Okay, the cannabis permanent commercial ordinance.
Let's see, well, we just had amendments to cultivation at Planning Commission last week. We will review all that with staff and will likely come to the board after the first of the year. We will look at also any proposed changes at the state level. This is always has an impact. And then, of course, retail, as we've been discussing, will go to the commission after the first of the year. Anything else? Did I miss?
Okay, jail. Anything new on the jail?
I think Rick is in the audience shaking his head no. I think we're still good to go out to bid after Christmas with anticipate opening the bids in February.
Okay. Wilderness oversight?
Yep, putting together the meeting you've requested for January, probably
Okay.
mid-January.
Good, thank you.
You got it.
Are you gonna, is your ad hoc going to pull the board on what dates were available? Is that the
You
meeting?
want you want the whole board there?
The request of the whole board was to come as the
Okay.
board as a whole.
That's fine. I'll move forward with that. That wasn't your direct request.
Well,
Well, I can do it, but that's perfect. So it'll be a special board meeting.
I apologize for not making that.
That's fine.
and I thought we also had asked for a review from one of their staff members of the legislation.
Reaching out to them, yes.
To have them present to us.
Right.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
That was my plan.
All right, great.
All right, county matters. These items include non-routine or controversial matters that are listed alphabetically by department, and members of the board, staff, or public may request that an item be heard out of order. Does the board have any?
Well, we heard the request from the audience. They wanted to see if we can move one item.
And Scott stepped outside.
So you're requesting 4.5. I believe also 4.6 has audience members here too, so I would hear. of those two up front. If there's anything else that the public would? No? Okay. So we'll hear 4-5 first, and then 4-6, and then we'll go back to 4-1.
Excuse me, Laura, these are going to be fairly long,
Likewise.
so quick break.
Okay, we will take a, what is it? We'll be back at 10:25, 10 minutes.
Thank you.
All right, we're back in session. Into item 4.5, introduce and waive the reading and enact an urgency ordinance to regulate grading activities on private parcels in Trinity County. Fiscal impact is unknown at this time. It will be dependent on permitting future grading activities and potential violations. Go ahead, Rick.
As you know, for several years, the Trinity County has not had a grading ordinance at any time since existence, so grading as a whole has been allowed. Recently, we've had several very large grading projects take off before any permitting processes were happen, and that we found that problematic. And so the discussion started off about trying to address grading issues. There's two of them really. It's the set of grading issues that are kind of the everyday grading that we have, but then there's the really large project type grading issues, like example, there's a property in Lewiston where someone came out and pushed fill out, and it's 90 feet deep. So we had a concern about the larger projects, particularly being that the large grading type projects have really accelerated since last summer. I believe it's in preparation for some of the things that are coming out in future cannabis ordinances, and also with building being what it is and being more desirable right now, we're also starting to see a lot of subdivision permits. But what we find is people go out and they have to do a discretionary process, but they'll do all the grading before the process rather than doing it the way they are, which is come get your permissions and your permits and then do the grading. So when we discussed it, we discussed the little ones and said, well, we really don't have anything, but we need to build a program on that. But we need to do something right now to try to deal with the 4 or 5% of the grading projects that are large in nature, that essentially what you do is it's the ones that we get pictures from Fish and Game saying, oh my God, look at what happened out here. They built this 3-acre pond and graded out 6 acres of land, and you guys need a grading ordinance. We have had a lot of pressure, particularly in the last 12 months, from the Water Board and from Fish and Wildlife, and also from several members or groups of the public wanting us to have something to protect us from, or to have more of a process for large-scale grading. So what we did was we developed this urgency ordinance to make large-scale grading required to get a permit prior to commencing the work. And what we're mainly focused on is we're focused on anything that disturbs more than 20,000 square feet of surface area, which is about half an acre, or anything that moves more than 1,500 cubic yards. There is some exemptions in there, and the exemptions the exemptions, what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll read them, but the one that's probably particular to everybody is we did put in an ag exemption, and what that is if you follow the contour of the land, which means you do not grade higher than 2 feet or lower than 2 feet, you can go out and you can, for better words, till your field. So if you have like 4 acres and you are growing soybeans and all you need to do is plow it you can do that as long as you don't excavate or anything. And what we're trying to aim there for is we're trying to prevent terracing. So if you were to change your farm and go to terracing, then you would be excavating most likely deeper than 2 feet or higher than 2 feet. So anyways, as I mentioned, those are the two things that we are aiming for. But we have exemptions, and the first one is anything that has gone through a permit process that gets a director's use permit or a conditional use permit is exempt from this. Any grading that's done under the supervision of the county agency, which the Board of Supervisors is a controlling body, is exempt, meaning if you tell me go build a road project, we can. Excavation and placement of fill associated with the installation and maintenance or generation of water, wastewater, or electrical energy regulated by the PUC. So you're building a power line, you're exempt. Trenching for county-approved pipeline, septic tank, disposal fields, conduits, electrical, communication facilities are exempt. So if you're putting in a large septic or sewer system in your backyard and it needs more than 20,000, I wish you a lot of luck if you do, but you're exempt. Grading as in accordance with plans and specifications incorporated in an approved surface mining permit, harvest timber plan, reclamation plan, or solid waste permit. Grading involved with ongoing invested mining facility that's conducted in accordance with the reclamation plan or approved use permit. Maintenance of fire breaks and roads to keep fire breaks or roads substantially in original condition. And that was one of the important ones, is there are a lot of folks that have long roads and they want to go out and they want to do something. Well, this allows you, if the road's existing, you can go out and work your road to get it back up to a good condition again. Access roads and building pads with conditions of approval for a subdivision or tentative map approved by Public Works. Grading of existing roads, public roads, driveways, and agriculture grading and other practices, including fuel reduction, fuel protection that do not substantially change the contours of the plan, applicable that use best management practices as recommended by the QSP or QSD, and they grade no more than 2 feet either above or below the land. So again, what I'm trying to explain is really this is to catch the large grading projects, that the ones that are significant, and again, only a few percentage of them that come through in this county every year. And but the theme is that we get them permitted so that folks can go out and continue the work, but do it with a plan that the county knows about it, and that the public, if it's large enough, the public does have a process of going through environmental permit and approving it. But it's also a lot of the, I'd say about 85 to 90% of what grading is done is in preparation for applying for a permit. And essentially this would stop that and allow or require that person to go get the proper permits before commencing the grading on itself. There are some provisions that we have in here as how we handle the violations. But again, we are after the hazards that, and you know, there's several of them. If you create a big enough fill area or cut large enough, you can create a hazard to public health. You can threaten the stability of adjacent properties or parcels. You can damage utilities, you can damage roadways, you can obstruct waterways, which have happened quite a bit. And you can seriously degrade water quality, and you can damage existing septic systems and water supply wells. Again, enforcement of the violation is really, it's focused towards getting them to stop, and we don't have mechanisms right now to stop these large grading projects, but it's a mechanism to force them to stop, go get a permit, and not only that, but go back and reclamate your land. So meaning that once you stop, we don't leave it out there to have erosion if we have a large rain. And that's why the violation and the abatement were written in a way that allows us to try to focus on abatement. As a matter of fact, even in here, it says that fines and penalties may be waived at the director's discretion based on corrective remedies, plans, and proposals per section 4 and 5. Fines will continue until the director determines reasonable corrective action has been issued. So, or been taken. So again, it's a focus of stop, secure what you have, go get the proper permits to do what you want to do. And the only reason we have to have the violation program, the violation in there, is that they chose not to do that and continue on doing what they were doing. So that in essence is what we had for the urgency ordinance to try to, again, put an end to what the big grading is. We do want to go back and deal with all the other grading eventually, but that's something that being a 1 to 2 year process. That would be much more, it would come after we gotten work done. But this will allow us to take care of the big stuff right now. And quite honestly, the final ordinance for the large grading, which again is only about, it's about 5 or it's a small percentage of the overall grading that we would want to permit or review. This is only dealing with that, and so with that I can answer any questions.
I'm going to have Margaret define what an urgency ordinance is and what it means and its timing, so we all understand that, and then we'll go back to Rick for questions.
Absolutely. So an urgency ordinance.
Go ahead and put your mic down.
Okay. It's a provision that allows the board to take immediate action. The difference between it and a regular ordinance is that it will go into effect immediately upon a positive roll call vote of the board. It does require a 4/5 vote in order to be passed. It will then be in effect for 45 days. Upon completion of the 45 days, if it is still needed, the board can renew it for an additional 10 months and 15 days. And again, if the board at that time feels it's still necessary, it can renew it for another year, to a grand total of 2 years that it's allowed to go into effect. There are provisions that it requires to have a public emergency or necessitate. I did review a copy of the ordinance provided, and it does have that public urgency aspect to it, and it's articulated within the findings of the ordinance, and as a result, it meets that requirement.
All right, thank you. John, you have a question?
I have several,
okay,
if you don't mind.
I would love to hear them.
Okay, so there's absolutely no other way if there's, for you or the county to try and stop somebody from grading if they're doing as much damage as you think they are? Fish and Wildlife?
We have to go to Fish and Wildlife to get them to take action, or the Water Board.
Right.
In particular situations, but it's
So
something.
you could continue to use that process?
Yes.
And it's quite effective because it doesn't put much pressure on our revenue. Okay. You said, well, you said that we've been working, this has been requested for several years.
Overall grading
ordinance,
plan, yes, an overall grading.
You mentioned that we discussed, who are we?
In context of where?
Of the urgency ordinance.
Oh, staff and county council.
Okay. Okay. This county started working toward a grading ordinance in 2004 and gave up on it because it was an election year, from what I understand. You were requested by the public, 2 people of the public, Kelly Gann and Jose Acosta, to bring forward a grading ordinance over the past year to 2 years. In essence, you can do your job if there's a large problem without this ordinance by using other agencies. You can also, in my opinion, not bypass the normal procedure for bringing forward a grading ordinance, which would be a full grading ordinance going through planning commission and having a lot of public input.
Is there a question in any of that?
You know what? I did ask a question, so, and there's a little bit more.
Go ahead.
But thanks for the interruption.
I want to keep you on task.
Yeah, right. Roughly, okay, here's a question. How many counties in the state of California have grading ordinances and how many don't?
I cannot answer that specifically.
Because you're not sure? I think probably 57 of them have grading ordinances and there's one that doesn't.
I would not be surprised.
Yeah, okay. And this has been going on for quite a few years, and I do not think this is the proper way to bring forward a grading ordinance and shove it down people's throats. Even though it does show that there's urgency, but I still think there's other agencies you can use and other ways you will have to go about this. I'm done.
I'm going to do some follow-up questions on him, and then I'm going to go to Judy. So the poster child is in my district where everybody in Lewiston can see, it looks like to be a large mine. There's some pretty major mines that have smaller tailing piles. So it's 93 feet from the top of his cut to the creek bill. My understanding, a lot of agencies looked at that and none could do anything about it. Was he cited for illegal grading?
No, it was not. I know that they did come out and he was, I believe, encouraged to install proper erosion control and stabilize the site.
So the other agencies couldn't stop what he did?
Yeah, they were looking to us for our ordinance or some mechanism for them to point to. What they look for when someone goes out and violates, they look for discharge. That's the main thing that they're looking for, is that the site discharges and causes creek turbidity or other problems associated with damaging, say, we had one where there was a large grading project and the guy filled in the neighbor's driveway. And, you know, those are things that you can address fairly quickly.
You can answer my questions. Supervisor Morris had questions.
Yeah, there seems to be a conflict in terms of our cultivation ordinance. In there, we require our license holders, cultivating license holders to, and it's been in our ordinance since day one, to get a construction, I forget the proper name of it, construction permit from the water board. So our license holders who need to move dirt are covered because we didn't have a grading ordinance, so we did put that in there to do some coverage of grading. So that, I believe, and I don't have it in front of me, is if you're moving an acre, I think, of dirt, versus now this is proposed 20,000 square feet, which is roughly a half acre. So there's a conflict there. So in terms of license holders and cultivation, they're covered if they need to move a decent amount of dirt. I realize your intention is those who are just really going rogue out there and blowing up creek sides and hillsides, and there's nothing immediately, so.
Well, and I want to make sure I add, it's people doing substantial grading prior to issuance of any type of permit or license.
Right, and they still need, if they're going to move that amount of dirt, they still need to get that water board permit.
Not if they're, no, you only need it if you're getting a permit, but what happens is they grade and then they go after the permit.
The construction permit through the water board? No, I mean, if they're gonna move dirt, they gotta get that permit.
Supervisor Morris, under item J, it falls it falls under the grading or under practices. So if you have a construction general permit qualified.
There it is, right?
There it is. So it doesn't, if you have that permit, then you're not.
Okay.
It's an exemption in
All
there.
right, thank you. That was my only question, just to see if there was some contradiction between the two ordinances.
Supervisor Chadwick, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. The urgency ordinance or interim ordinance or emergency ordinance, as we have experienced in the past with the cannabis, has been limited to adjustment periods. We have all lived through unintended consequences as a result of jumping into an urgency ordinance. I think that this too has unintended, unseen, unknowable, and I agree and concur with Supervisor Finley that the process, we left the public out again. This is a remedy that we need to instill, that we don't go around the public. The ordinance, the discussion should have been through the Planning Commission. There should have been public time for input. This urgency interim, you know that over 2 years ago, I started working with Mark Lancaster, 5 counties. I had to push him because he had been burnt by the Board of Supervisors in the previous years. We were working on a grading ordinance that you requested me to step away from and asked Carl Fisher to take it up. When my follow-ups, I found that there were no meetings taking place. I then contacted you and you gave me a conversation. And then in September, I received from a committee I'm on with Donna Rupp a follow-up to a meeting in minutes that I then requested in writing to you in email, a sit-down to be briefed for what's going on, because it was the opposite of what you had told me orally. I think I tagged Leslie and David, and I have not heard back from you. That was months ago. And now it's in front of us on a Friday night, going into the holidays. A lot of people haven't even had time to read it, and we're supposed to vote on consent, and we're locked into it for 45 days. And we have an elect coming in January. We're talking 2 weeks that in his district this is going to affect. He should be able to weigh in on that. He's being, and I know what it's like to be the one coming in and being cut out. It's not fair. His district elected him, and they expect him to represent. I think the only equitable thing would be to, at the most, publish this. If you want to, I want a grading ordinance.
Supervisor Chadwick, in equal fairness of interruption, we are still at the question period.
How did this come to be an urgency ordinance after what I just laid out, my involvement, your removal of me, and now it's before us as an urgency ordinance?
Okay. There was no intent to specifically remove you, and my apologies if it did come down apparent that way. Again, what we are focusing on is we're focusing on a very small percentage of the overall program. The whole program as itself is going to be a very public program, but you know, I want to go back to pointing out what's going on in planning right now is there's 4 major things that we've been asked to work on, which is cannabis cultivation, the grading ordinance, the general plan update, and type K housing element. And quite honestly, getting anything past cannabis has been a struggle at best, especially with the staff that we have right now. We're only staffed at about 30 to 40% of what we need overall. We've had very little success in getting the senior plan. So That's why it's been a struggle to get to updating the updating the grading ordinance, especially when we've had a lot of deadlines come up on other issues within that block that have specific dates that we can't go beyond. So, again, what we have is we have some particular gradings going on that's been damaging, and we're trying to resolve just that small piece of it, not the overall program. That is something that we definitely want to have as a public program and receive input.
Any further questions? Okay. Jerry, do you have any questions?
I do. Understanding the fact that this is a very contentious item here, I'm not sure so why, because it has issues. But I hear what John is saying a little bit on the process here. I think that, we have some people here in the crowd that make a living moving dirt. And I think they need to be heard a little bit, and I'm not sure anybody's heard in this. And so my bigger question is there a way to tie into this, that this isn't just going to get pushed off for 45 days, then another 10 and a half months, and then another year without this actually being addressed?
So you've heard council, but I believe you can set a date.
I think that's important. I think that these gentlemen all work, they shouldn't be put under the pressures of businesses shut down based on, this. I think they should have due process, and their voices should be heard, and I think that this is something the community needs. I'm for this, but I think that there is a process, like John had mentioned here, that I think people's voices need to be heard. I'm not sure many people are going to move a lot of dirt between here and March. So, and that's why I'm saying, I don't know, I could be wrong, this is much something you know more about, but my assumption, I don't like to have assumptions, but I just feel that setting a date so that these people that this affects, they know that they're not going to get out of here today saying, oh, it's 45 days, but really it's 2 years. And I think that's important for them, because this is their livelihood. And just like for us, we've waited on certain things. I'm just I think if it came with a little more, like here's when we're going to have this done, that these people are going to get their things done in the planning department and come get their voices heard, I think that would take away a lot of anxiety within the community. So if that's possible, I think that's a good idea. That's it.
Okay, John?
Okay, could you contract out the planning, the ordinance, the whole grading ordinance? It's something you could do since you don't have any staff.
Yes, we actually have someone that we've been using.
And since you have no staff, how are you going to enforce this?
We do have compliance officers.
For cannabis, or just
well, it's
Jeff and Jim?
Yeah, no, the 3 compliance officers that we have for cannabis that are in cannabis right now can do other duties as assigned. And so, if they come across a large...
Do they get paid out of general fund or out of cannabis?
It depends on the nature of the violation. There are sometimes when they're dealing with building issues that they will be paid out of the building department rather than cannabis.
You also made a statement that there are a small number of problems. Instead of taking this huge stomp to get rid of the small number of problems, try working on the small number of problems, if that's what you have.
Well, again, it's just a small group that creates a large problem, is what the issue is here.
Okay, so we had our question period out of the way.
Wait till comments.
Yeah, there's no leading comments in those at all. Okay, so I assume several of the public would like to speak on this item, so let's start it off.
I think one of my issues is that several years, 10 years ago or more, there was a building site on Little Brown Street that had mud go into the creek. They were being sued over by the state. And we were hired to go in and investigate how much mud from that property went into the creek. There was zero. We could prove that the mud never left his property. But unfortunately, the Forest Service next door, all of their mud went across his driveway into the creek. And he got sued and fined for the damage that the Forest Service actually did. So I have issues with how you guys are looking at the damage being done. Like you say, this man in Lewiston has this 90-foot thing. Has he, other than the eyesore, what damage has he done? And the other issue, it sounds like the state is asking permission from you guys to actually issue fines and fees and stuff that they don't have the right to do. It reminds me of the community forest where they came in, BLM came in and asked you to put an ordinance in that you can't camp on the community forest. You did that. We have campers camping in the community forest who have warming fires that actually burn acres of land. So I don't understand why we're doing what we're doing. You know, I agree with the board that you guys, this is something that should be done without an emergency ordinance. It's ludicrous what you guys are doing.
Good morning, Mark Lancaster. I'm the director of the 5 County Salmon Conservation Program. I've been working on grading ordinances for Trinity County since 1994. I would like to just make a couple of comments. I think every one of you is correct in the statements all of you have made so far. I think, unfortunately, you do need to consider an urgency ordinance at this time. The ordinance you have before you is very not well crafted. It is not very comprehensive. It once again deals with a single specific issue and avoids much of the complexity and the issues around grading in Trinity County. But I have experience with draft grading ordinances in this county since, actually I take it back to 1986. Just by agendizing a grading ordinance for discussion, you will see a substantial increase in wintertime grading. Landowners will now move quickly. Now, contractors will take advantage of this. I have been an expert witness in grading court cases in Trinity County Court in which grading contractors have specifically cited the lack of a grading ordinance for the violations of water quality laws that they've done. We have seen in 1986, it was called potato patches. We proposed a draft grading ordinance and we had a phenomenal amount of winter grading to beat the ordinance. The ordinance died. John is correct, in 2004 there was actually a draft grading ordinance prepared. It actually took till 2007. At that time, a board member requested that the actual ordinance be delayed until after the election, at which time a change in the board killed the ordinance. So one of the issues, the ordinance you have in front of you is I will just tell you, is a very poor planning process. It's also a very positive planning process in that you at least are recognizing some level of emergency problem. It avoids much of the underlying grading issues in this county. So I guess I find it very awkward to say, I do believe you should adopt this ordinance. There is some language in it which, it says this ordinance is in effect until such time as you establish replacement regulations. I would hate for you to take away from this that this is your permanent solution. And I would hate to see you guys even cite it as an actual solution to the problem. It is not. But you've opened, the director has opened the can of worms of again approaching the issue. And so I think that can of worms is open and you really should consider short-term adopting it. But my apologies, it's way more complex than that, but I will yield.
Next.
Good morning, Diane Richards, Hayford. You've been served with a violation warning of denial of rights under color. Tina has them for each of you. It's my notice and demand. You're violating my rights. Under 42 USC 1983, it provides a cause of action against a person who under color of state law deprives an individual of federal constitutional rights or limited federal statutory rights. For instance, 1, deprivation of property without just compensation, a violation of the Fifth Amendment, violation of the Fourth Amendment Equal Protection Clause, deprivation of procedural and substantive due process in violation of the 14th Amendment. Under the Takings Clause, the Fifth Amendment prohibits the taking of private property without just compensation. You're telling me what to do with my property. I have both ag and mining. And in many cases, my road is probably better than most of the roads that you allegedly care for in the county. And we do have to move a lot. Sometimes a big rain, if we have a big pour, we have to get out there and move some dirt and stop the erosion immediately. And we do have to move a lot of property, a lot of soil. But we do a great job, etc. We don't want any erosion. It's my pasture is one of the best in Hayfork. On my mining property, I have berms this high, okay, so people can stay off on my fire breaks. I don't want anybody driving in there and going in there, so I would be moving quite a bit of dirt on my berms, and I have a lot of them. And I share that property as well, easement with SPI, etc. You're telling me what to do? That's not going to fly with me. And this kind of thing where you're sliding it in under emergency ordinance where you don't have the public input and hardly anyone even knows about it. I mean, there's just a few people that heard about it. You're violating, you know, the public process. I think it's disingenuous. I think it's deceptive. And you really need to stop it. As an example, I think with you putting the fees and the fines and you have to do permits, that means I have to contract with you to do something with my property that I already do. That I don't want to contract with you. I don't want you to tell me what I can and can't do when I'm mining or my ag activities. Once I start to contract with you, then all of a sudden we get to go into disputes in court. And there's been this particular law firm, in fact, when they did a whole bunch of these type of lawsuits in Shasta County that were multi-million-dollar lawsuits of ranchers fighting back on grading ordinances. Also people that often come and just, you know, voluntarily grade a neighbor's place, they would be subjected to fines because they just, now no one's going to do it for free or out of a humanitarian goodness. That's what you're going to cause. And that's not the kind of county that we have. I hope we don't have. Thank you.
Good morning, Deidre Brower. A grading ordinance is needed. I'll let you guys decide if this is right or the right time, but I have a couple of specific questions in here. One, is there a way if somebody has a certified grading plan that they can get a permit? It's not super clear in here. I understand in item J under the exemptions, if they're using these best management practices or if they have a SWIP, but it does say substantially change the natural contour and have a SWIP, so that's a little unclear to me, that whole section. And under fees, it says normal use permit planning fees shall apply in addition to associated direct costs accrued by the county for staff time related to plan review. I was under the impression that those use fees covered that staff time that it took to do the work. And then there's some conflict also with time limits. Number 5 says it'll remain in effect, and then we have that it'll at the end under urgency that it's for 45 days and can be renewed. So those are just some of the concerns I have with language. Thank you.
Scott Harrison from Hayfork. First, let me say I agree with almost all the comments that the board members have made here. And we're probably going to have some kind of a grading ordinance. I do have concerns that the contractors, go crazy now and just start moving dirt. I think the project should be aimed more at people that abuse the situation, do cause damage to a watershed and stuff, more than just slapping a huge ordinance on people like me that then you're doing for 40 years and not cause the problem. I know the enforcement maybe is so difficult on people doing, but if they're actually contaminating our watersheds and stuff, there should be something that can be done. Otherwise, I agree with most of what you guys have said. I think you're going to have to allow some public comments. I don't think this addresses distance from watersheds. There's lots of issues that would have to be discussed, if it was changed. What it should be required if you're doing a grading project, 10,000 yards, but you're 3/4 of a mile from a drainage or creek, that would be a lot different than if you're 200 yards from a creek, or 300 yards from a creek. Thanks.
Hello, Jimmy Brown, Burt Ranch. I think the public has felt like there hasn't been enough transparency, at least in the District 4 area. I guess I can only speak for. And this would be a really good opportunity to bring back the public's trust in a process that includes everybody that lives in the area. Fish and Game and the Water Board do violations for gradings that are done improperly against the state law, and I think it would be good to utilize those agencies for enforcement before jumping the gun into an area that's already really not enforced, in my opinion, and hasn't been enforced for however many years in Trinity County. So I would urge that more time is allowed for public comment and involvement from everybody. Thank you.
Morning, Mr. Chair, Tom Malenko, Douglas City. I think I share a lot of concerns that everybody has. We would be well suited to have a grading ordinance, join the other 50 some odd counties that likely have grading ordinances. I do think it really needs to go through the appropriate process. I think we need to see this at the Planning Commission and discuss it, because I think we can get an actual grading ordinance that a good place to start might be the State Water Board for cannabis requirements on earth moving, which, lest we get worried about what, I can only speak for licensed cannabis activity. Illegal growers may do illegal growing, or illegal grading to go with their illegal growing, and that is all illegal. What is legal and licensed is all subject to the State Water Board order starting in July, or for a few people still in the North Coast Water Board, which prohibits any grading in the wet season. The State Water Board is, I won't necessarily call it restricted, but specific about what it allows for any earthwork. It's got erosion control measures, it's got provisions for slope, it's got provision for drainage, it's got specifications for roads. If you want to do terraces, you got to get professionals. These things are covered. So any licensed cannabis grower, that means somebody trying to get into it or anything, has to be subject to that. So there's already coverage for that. I think that is a good model to look at a county-wide ordinance. It doesn't mean we have to use exactly that, but a lot of the groundwork is there. I'd like to see this move forward, and it just doesn't seem like the urgency ordinance today is the thing we need to do. I would encourage us to visit this through the usual ordinance process. Thank you.
Kate Graves from Lewiston. Seems like you guys heard about this about the same time we did, so I'll just add some of the things that are in this one that hopefully are gonna, this isn't gonna fly, but excluding the county, that's that's classic, you know, people don't care for the government not having to rule, follow rules they impose on others. And the other thing is, when we're told that this won't evolve over time to include grading your road, there's nothing that shows in government's history that they're not going to eventually get there and beyond to moving a wheelbarrow load of dirt. And I know that sounds exaggerated, but you can go back in time. Gun laws, those are a great example of people that lived in Trinity County and you went to school with a gun in the gun rack in the back of your truck, and how you would laugh at it if you knew what was going to happen today. No way. That's where it goes. That's where government settles to. And it won't be you guys. You guys probably won't be here as it moves along to there, but that's where it'll end. The other problem is you're going after people. The examples you have won't be covered by this ordinance. It's not. It can't be retroactive. And I find it hard. I find it impossible to believe that between all the bureaucracies and all the laws and everything that people have to jump through today, that Fish and Game and the Water Board couldn't find issue with that 90-foot cut or fill slope, because they could go after someone for a dirt clod rolling downhill if they want. So I don't know what that issue is, but there's plenty of laws in place that if something moves off your land, that you are responsible and liable, and there's laws all over to cover that. Also, I don't see that the county is, if they even go out and properly inspect, because they're not, they always exempt themselves. If you go out and you give a permit for a grading ordinance and it destroys someone's well or watershed, how did they even, what expertise do they have to say that that could have been avoided and that they would have caught it? They have no way of knowing really whether that's going to happen or not. And then if it does happen, the county's not liable anyway. So you leave the property owner who's affected by someone doing a grading ordinance or grade, whether they meant to or not, affecting their watershed. The county's still not responsible for it, and all you did was get money and cause someone to get your permission to do it. And I think the reason why Trinity County is against grading ordinances is because there's already laws in place to cover the effect of grading ordinances that would cover. And it's one of the last things we can do in this county without getting the government's permission and paying them to do it. And we've done it for a long time. The people we have problems with are new. There's other ways to go after them. If it's for a growing pot and they're getting a permit from you guys to do it, then don't give them the permit. There's lots of ways to handle this. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Yeah, good morning, John Brower from Junction City, and I also want to echo much as what has been said. A couple things. One, what I've heard around the campfire is that this one egregious instance in Lewiston that's being held up as an example, that's absolutely being prosecuted by both Water Board and Fish and Wildlife, and hasn't been dropped by them. But if that person doesn't stay on schedule with their restoration, he's actually looking at criminal charges that carry jail time. That's being enforced. And so adding another layer of permitting, a redundant layer of permitting on top of what the Water Board and Fish and Wildlife are already requiring is just, it's not what we should be doing here. It does seem that multiple attempts at grading ordinances that have been mounted in Trinity County over the decades have failed for whatever reasons. I think we should look at those reasons and open it up to more public involvement and have something like a workshop setting, perhaps with the Planning Commission, to start working through this and not end up with something that people of Trinity County just don't want. And then the larger, more global view of this thing is really should include the commercial cannabis and its CEQA discussion. And I know this is a knee-jerk reaction right now to the comments on this new cannabis cultivation ordinance update. We still don't have access to the public comments and agency comments from the original CEQA initial checklist from a year and a half ago. I've tried to get from planning and now transportation, and had a conversation recently with Rick, and he said he will not share those comments to the initial checklist. And so I want to encourage everybody here to open up both of these processes to a more public, inclusive process. Community engagement is imperative if we really want this to work. And so both this grading ordinance and this larger CEQA issue on commercial cannabis really needs to be opened up in a more community engagement type fashion. Thank you.
Okay, last chance.
Edward Harvey, Weaverville. Going to keep it short. I remember years ago I brought up the grading bag myself. The grand jury brought that up in their water report several years back. It seems to me as though there's been a lack of attention, and it basically falls on your shoulders, your 5 shoulders, that you've been busy doing other stuff. I like the idea of a full, well-done ordinance, but right now, something is going to happen. I think you should go with the emergency ordinance in order to keep from kicking the can down the road. And that's enough.
All right. Gone. Back to the board. Mr. Kennedy.
Yes, sir. In light of that, and since this is such an important item at this point, after so many years of pushing it off, maybe the board can consider an emergency or urgency ordinance stopping all grading. Would that work, Rick? Would that make everybody happy?
No, it would
Okay.
not. I mean,
I agree with
this is
you,
again.
but it's an option we have, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Let's.
Is that a motion?
No.
No, you said it in the form of a motion, so does
Okay.
do we have a second? No, it's motion dies.
Oh, thank you. I was counting on that.
You're lucky. Are we still discussing things? Or is
Yeah,
this
we're
motion?
discussing.
We're discussing.
I think Mark brought up some compelling ideas and thoughts because he has a history that I surely don't know. I think this is a really, really touchy subject. It's been going on since 1986. It's kind of a can that's been kicked down the road for over 30 years. I think Everett's totally right about this. I think that the key is a date. I really think you gotta, I think the urgency part of this isn't the problem, but it's not letting it drag out and not getting addressed, which we have a history of doing in this county, of things taking quite a long. It's not just this county, public. This whole process always takes a long time in everybody's county. The fact that we're the only county that doesn't have this, I don't like that, because I think that there's a reason 57 other counties actually have something in place. This is something that isn't, and we're the abnormal to the normal. That doesn't matter, but I just think that public input's huge. I'm not against this, but I'd just like to see it not be like the way it was explained, it could be 2 years before it's addressed. I think that's just not even.
Well, I want to emphasize again, this is not dealing with 90% of grade. This is only dealing with a very small portion of grade, 10% of it. We have to come back with a grading policy to get all the rest of this. This is just to stop the really big stuff. And that was it. It's not intended to focus on most of the grading activities that go on in this county. But we have to develop something for that. And again, it's within the work program. It's just getting to it has been the struggle.
Well, I think one of the keys too is that, like John's mentioned to his staff, do you have the ability to address this quickly? Is this something that where you're going to bring this to us, or do you need some sort of allotment or an extra staff person to make sure this gets done quickly and it isn't drug out.
Yeah, I believe through consultant services and engineering staff that we can deal with the grading end of it.
Let's be real here.
No, that's why I'm trying. I'm trying to be, I don't want this to get drug out for these guys for 2 years. That's why I'm trying to be real. I want to.
If we go this process, which is fine, you're not looking at having a grading ordinance until 2020. I mean, that would be
realistic.
That would be realistic, still working hard to get it done.
With this process or without?
Without this process. I mean,
So
it's in a normal
there's
process.
57 other counties we can poach from.
Right. You know what, we can sit here and have this argument. I've been around this longer than I'd like to be. The fact is this stuff, it goes way slower.
That's why it should have been started, I tried to start it in 2013.
Okay, coulda, shoulda, woulda.
And no, I was told, maybe we shouldn't look at this, we don't have any support from the board.
So, but the reality is, 18 months we took for a vision statement. You know, these things, if it got done in a year,
Well,
I would say that's highly
darn it, Keith, then maybe supervisors shouldn't be involved in this process. Maybe we should step back and let staff.
The fact
run
is,
this.
is that we have given the planning priorities, and they have to take it one at a time. And if we decide that we want to go this way and have this a higher priority, something else is going to suffer. If it's K-housing or general plan or cannabis. That there's only so fast and only so much staff and so many consultants. So just understand, I'm not arguing against this, but I'm saying just understand if we get a grading ordinance by doing it through the public process, we would congratulate ourselves by having it done by 2020. That would be a reasonable goal to move forward.
And I think that would gain public's trust. I think that would
That's
be the
fine.
correct way to do it then.
But this is not, you're not just gonna say, oh, we can send it out, it'll be whipped out, we'll have this done by June. It's just not gonna happen.
Correct.
So.
I have a question for Margaret. Margaret, so if this was to pass as is, unless someone had some minor changes, remind me again what we are obligated to do. We have a year under an urgency ordinance to perform and have some other document created. Remind me again.
So it will automatically expire after 45 days.
Right.
The board may then re-up it for another 10 months and 15 days to make it a year, and then you have 1 year in addition to that. At each step, staff does need to provide a summary of what has been done to try to eliminate the urgency ordinance and create either a permanent ordinance or prevent problems. So along the way, you would get status updates. You can establish how long you want it to go for, but again, you can only do it those 3 times. You can, so if you want it to come back earlier, that's fine, but you won't be able to send it out for the full 2 years.
So while this is going on, it's reasonable to think that we could have that public process go in front of the commission to move this forward so the public can be heard.
If you're going to create a permanent grading ordinance, it would require to go before planning and have that public input. You could not do a permanent ordinance without having that public input.
Right, but I would say it concurrently would have to happen versus saying, well, we'll buy ourselves a year and let it sit on the shelf. I don't think that would be the intention of this board. I don't need to make that assumption, but.
Yes, it would have to go forward.
Okay.
So I believe the goal for the board is to work with staff to develop a plan to protect the environment. That's the #1 goal. In this ordinance, I see fines and fees regulating the things that are done wrong and not clear pathways for someone trying to go forward. And I think that would need to be established before an urgency ordinance was to be approved. Any proposed activity that is not exempt from the categories identified in Section 4 should and shall provide grading plans as an attachment by a qualified QSD or QSP or a professional engineer. And any projects that are presently going on, if they had an engineer stamp, should be, if there was moving forward an urgency ordinance. We cannot just tell people what they can't do. that forces them to do it behind the backs of the government that they already don't trust. So we have to have clear pathways lit up that they can move forward so they're not prohibited from their livelihoods, whether they're a grader or an engineer, whether they want to put a big barn or whatever it is. And a lot of these already come with an engineer stamp, so I don't see why we would have to duplicate that. I am wanting to see a grading ordinance. I think the urgency ordinance, it's already out there, so now. And so I think the holidays is a good time. I don't think that, I think that people are gonna be caught up. I really would like to see, and I will put it in a motion, that the board be able to communicate to staff the things that we don't see in an urgency ordinance or that we don't like before we adopt it. We have time to talk to our constituents, so I would make a motion that we table this until the 3rd of January at our next board meeting with the changes and the adaptions, providing a pathway for those who want to work within the system and allowing our constituents to have time to talk to us. So my motion is to table this until the 3rd.
It will be the 2nd of January.
Or the 2nd, thank you, the 2nd of January.
Do we have a second on tabling it? Motion dies.
Make a motion to approve item 4.5 from Planning and Zoning as presented.
Second.
Okay, moved and second. Do you have any subsequents? All right, in discussion,
I have a question for Margaret again.
okay?
In 45 days, can we make any changes that we might hear from our constituents if this was to move forward?
Yes,
So we could have that time and it'd come back? Okay,
that's correct.
thank you.
Substantial changes?
Yes. You can make significant changes to it. Again, you'd have to vote on it again with a 4/5 vote, and it wouldn't increase the amount of time you have for it. You still would have to have your permanent ordinance within the 2-year period.
So, discussion that when this goes down, I think we need to also take a minute here, and I'm going to add this into this conversation, that we need to give the Planning Commission and Rick guidance on what the planning has to do. We have several things that take a long time, K-housing being one of them, and the general plan being huge, so we will need to set priorities, and I'd like to do it today after this.
Actually, I prefer that you agendize that for our next meeting or the meeting after that, so that we can be given what some of the items are that need to be looked at and how important they are, and have time to discuss it with staff.
We can agendize at the next meeting, because staff will be kind of lost here on what to do. All right. Let's go ahead and do a roll call vote.
Supervisor Mize?
Yes.
Supervisor Finley?
No.
Supervisor Chadwick?
No?
Supervisor Morris?
Yes.
Supervisor Groves?
Yes. So this item is defeated. And we will agendize, please, for staff at the next meeting, a plan to move forward for planning to see what priorities we give planning to move forward with your limited staff. And Rick, I would ask you to send a note to supervisors on what that list of things is. I think we're pretty, the 4 ones you've already mentioned, but if there's other things to...
I have a question regarding that. Could Rick work with our CAO? Because the CAO has a little bit higher overall look at what needs to go on, and maybe we get recommendations from CAO instead of directly from Police
Okay,
Department.
that makes sense, I apologize. We should work together. Then I think, is it clear, Richard, that what we'd be
Yeah,
looking
it's
for?
like the fuel thing, the housing element, stuff like that. to address.
Chair, you said the item failed, did I hear you correctly? Did it? I thought it was.
Four-fifths.
Oh, I got you. Right, thank you.
I have turned on my light and you didn't see it, I'm sorry, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's
It
behind
was,
some
it
cables.
was, it was pretty much negated because we're going to the CAI. I was just gonna make sure that, I don't know if Jeremy has his account through, and so if you're gonna include the board of supervisors, I would encourage that he would be actively involved in it as well.
As you legally can,
You're right.
or cannot.
Okay, let's move on. Transportation, 4.6, adopt a resolution which recommends additional U.S. Forest Service ML3 roads for highway vehicles, accessibility in Trinity County to forest supervisors of Shasta Trinity National Forest.
Okay, this is in answer or a follow-up for the item that I gave last meeting where I presented what the travel management plan was and had all the maps that were available, and also made public aware of the links that were in there. We have received no notices or comments, but I am bringing it back to you for final action and approval today to forward on to the National Forest Service.
Thank you for the maps.
Yes, thank you.
Greatly appreciated. Although I couldn't really tell any difference. I thought there was gonna be way more in my district, that's all.
Okay, I guess I'm the guy that brought his map.
Yep, I did.
I left it.
I have a question for the.
Okay, go ahead.
Holly's not here, is she?
Yes.
I didn't see her.
We need new battery.
Well, I thought she was going to be here, I'm sorry.
I just have a question as it relates to District 2. Do you recall, and again, I know it's been on the book, this process has been on the books for a while. Has anyone reached out to the Weaverville Basin Trail folks, the Community Forest folks, and the Trail Alliance folks?
I believe so. I'm not 100% sure, but I know that there was an outreach, an extensive outreach to several people, both in the initial beginning and towards when we were actually presenting what the final results were. And I have, for public input, I have 3 public meetings were held with that throughout the county, one in Weaverville, Trinity Center, and Hayfork. They did go over and talk to the Reading Dirt Riders and the Hayfork MX Track folks. And I don't see anything in there specifically to those folks, but I believe that she did at one time make it available to them.
The reason I ask, and this could be resolved, I just don't have the answer, is there was concern a couple of years ago about it, some of the trails within the basin, if any of these roads were to cross or mingle of motorized vehicles versus non. And so that's a rough description of what I'm recalling from a couple of years ago. So that's why I want to know if any updates from that audience, if you've heard.
No.
Or anything got resolved as a result of a public meeting. You don't recall?
I've not heard or
Okay,
been advised of anything.
okay. That was my,
And I don't have the map in front of me, but I believe the only road that really was affecting it was Weaver Valley.
right, and Musser Hill, which kind of is close to some of the trail system as well, so. Right. Right, so those are, might be concern to those groups who use the trails.
And again, this is a recommendation
Uh-huh.
to the forest supervisor, And, well, we might not have received comments here.
They can do it there.
They can
Okay.
absolutely do it there.
All right.
This will go through a NEPA process
Okay,
for final consideration.
got it. Thank you, Rick. That's it.
Anybody else? Okay, Rick, I have some additions that I would like to add in here. Number one, I don't know how this gets put on to a road system map, but we have the Trinity Lake Bottom, which has been shut off to ATVs, which is actually a perfect place to ride ATVs from an environmental standpoint and a Yahoo standpoint.
Trying to tell that to people at Bruce Lake.
Well, Bruce Lake has the advantage of having water.
Which makes it more fun.
They do float upside down. I would tell you that for a fact. So I would like somehow to be notified within this.
Yeah, we can add
this.
it to this.
Yeah, so it was pointed out to me earlier today as somebody who rides ATVs looked out from his ATV and watched somebody in a Toyota pickup spinning Brodies out there, wondering why that guy can do that, but he can't. So I have a couple of roads. We have the 37N55, which is the Poison Canyon Loop, which you have not recommended. That road is a low-use road, goes to one low-use trailhead. I would like to see that moved up to weak or recommended. I have three of them here that aren't on the map. And they don't have, since they're not on the map, they don't have numbers. One is the Boulder Lakes Trail Road. There's a lot of offshoots on that. That's a more used road, so I'd like to see that go to recommended, not strong recommended. We have the Bowerman Ridge Road. That one, there's a lot of people that ride that road anyway, and there's a lot of private people that ride that road. I'd like to see that go to recommended. And there's my other one. I counted the Poison Canyon Trail. So those were the three changes plus the lake bottom that I'd like to see added. Okay. Any other questions for Rick?
I have, just want to go back to something.
Go ahead.
So Rick, just kind of in the bigger picture, the 50,000-foot view, if you could make a note to have them kind of review these road systems through the lens of, as I mentioned last meeting, through multi-use as fuel break around communities and or emergency, I guess, exits from certain communities. If there's a certain section of the community that's blocked in from a fire, is there another way the community can get out? If that is at all, can be looked at through this discussion, where it makes sense of the communities.
And Rick, I will say that, and I had some discussions with Polly, but I didn't finish those up. There are several roads here that Forest Service says are open that I really wish were open. Yeah. There's a bunch of them in here that have gates year-round, and so if these are the official roads that the Forest Service says open, that would be great to hear, because then we can go to the Forest Service and say, hey, take that gate down, it's May 31st. So I just want to make sure that these are the roads that are open. before we move it on. Yes.
Yes, Rick, on the roads that go through private property, SPI is the main example. How are those handled? Are they allowed to ride?
There was some discussion with SPI, that's why I'm thinking
Okay.
there might be, that might have lended to why those 3 roads might not be on the list. I don't know, I have to go back and find out why. But I do know that there was a couple of spots where SPI.
Okay, there's, in District 5, there are several spots where they're just not highlighted, and if SPI wants them shut down, they're kind of, or not ridden on, they're kind of useless to go through. They don't complete the loop, otherwise they're fine roads.
Well, all the roads that I'm talking about are share roads. And I believe these are put on because they feel they're a higher quality road. But the Forest Service, since they no longer maintain roads, these roads have degraded down to where cars and ATVs can be compatible, in my opinion. Okay, any other questions for Rick?
Yeah, I wasn't quite clear on the SPI. Are they allowed to ride SPI property if there's green on either side of it? Or do you know?
I believe they are.
Okay.
Not 100% sure, but my understanding is that if there's something accessible in the forest past that point, that they have an easement through there and they keep it open. But I know SPI has also shut a lot of roads off because they don't want people on their land. But it's something that I'll follow up on.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I believe if there's one side or the other, anything that's not marked, yeah, you're supposed to, I believe, trailer them through.
You can't get a trailer up there.
Well, that's the way this is designed by the Forest Service, is to limit the amount of usage. All right, time for public.
I agree with you on the lake bottom. My only concern with the lake bottom is when I was a child, I remember driving down those roads. The roads are still in the same condition as they were when back in the 50s. So you drive down the road at 60 miles an hour and thoroughly enjoy yourself, and there's no bridge or there's no culvert. There's just a hole in the ground that you plow into the other side face first. So if we're going to open that, which it has been open because of water, somewhere along the line you need to put some kind of barrier or something up so people won't drive over the non-existing bridges or culverts.
John Browers from Junction City. The public staff report is not in color and is unreadable. Is there any way we could project a map up for everybody to see or something like that? As far as the big picture goes, I think it's awesome to open up these, expand these off-road vehicle opportunities. I think the tourism would be greatly benefited by this. It's ridiculous that there is no connectivity at this point out of the Forest Service roads for ATVers. I think this is an awesome opportunity to try to open some of this back up and be able to provide more enjoyment of our public lands. It's a great opportunity, but I don't know what was the criteria for selecting different roads that are not being recommended to be opened up. And it'd be great if we could actually see some maps.
Go ahead, Bob.
On the online agenda, you can't see the maps in color. They're
Can we see one here?
Today, I don't think we have the capability.
No, and you might want to look at the video from 2 weeks ago when Rick made the presentation. He went over the criteria.
Oh, missed that.
Okay, any other public? Okay, last chance.
Why do you give them a last chance?
Because they know they want to talk, they just don't want to get up in front of people.
Looking for a motion.
Yes.
So moved.
Second.
And that's as recommended with my changes.
With your changes, yes, 4.6 with changes.
Okay, we have a move and a second. All those in favor, or this is a roll call, I'm sorry.
Supervisor Morris? Supervisor Chadwick?
Aye.
Supervisor Myers?
Aye.
Supervisor Finley?
Yes.
Supervisor Groves?
Aye. All right. Let's try to hammer this down from here on out. 4.1. Appoint Helen Stone and Florence O'Reilly to the PSA2 Area Agency on Aging Advisory Council to serve 4-year terms expiring December 2022.
Yeah, go away.
Who's taking this one on, John?
No, it wasn't for me, but I'll go ahead and take it on. The advisory board is looking for 2 more people from Trinity County that are desperately needed, and Helen and Florence have stepped up, and we can appoint them or we cannot, and the advisory board works specifically with older Americans, and they are very, the advisory board has changed in the past 6 months. They've become very active, and it's good to see. It'll help focus PSA2 with some of the new things we have coming out and some of the items we have lacking, such as people coming to our lunches and a few other things. It's starting to die off a little bit, talking to some people.
All right.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, any questions?
No, I was hoping that Florence would be here. I know Helen, but I don't see somebody I don't know, so say thank you to her. Yeah, she has a great writer.
Okay, public have any comment? PSA2. Okay.
I move to approve.
Second.
All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. Okay, 4.2, authorize a vehicle allowance reimbursing 1,000 miles per month at current IRS rates for the Director of Transportation. Potential net savings of $10,000 annually to the road fund. Richard, is this yours?
It is. We brought this back in front of the board a while ago and had a correction because in the staff report it said that the Director of Transportation would receive back pay, I believe, something like that, which should not have been in there. So we brought it out and we're bringing it back to the board again. This would be for Rick Tippett, Director of Transportation, which is in our ordinance that both the Director of Transportation and the General Services Director board can allow for vehicle allowance. Currently, he's driving a vehicle that will be taken out of circulation. It's now past 270,000 miles. We're looking at probably $45,000 to replace that, plus the annual cost of insurance and maintenance on it. This would be a flat rate of $545. We want to clarify that the IRS rate was used as an example. In January, the IRS rate would be going up, but this would not go up. The stipend would stay the same at the $545. And that would include his responsibility of maintaining the vehicle and covering insurance on the vehicle, so it would be a net cost savings to the county, I believe.
Any questions, Richard?
Yeah. I'm trying to find it, I apologize. When I was reading the backup on the code, I felt like there was a conflict, so I'm trying to go to the code section. I think it was C. The Board of Supervisors may, by minute order, assign to lead positions of Transportation Department vehicles on a 24-hour basis and permit such vehicles to be taken home if they find such after the review of public interest. I'm not seeing, I guess what I want to ask is there a protocol or a government code or a county code that would be more applicable? Do we have an MOU? It seems to me in less than 2 years this has come up in various ways, at least 3 times to my recollection, and I'm not finding a protocol.
The take-home on October 2nd, we had a issue and a grievance from those staff member regarding take-home vehicles, and the board directed staff within that 1 year period to review take-home vehicle policies, and we're doing that. This one actually is in, and I'll refer to Margaret, this is actually an ordinance that allows the board to approve an actual stipend for a vehicle as opposed to just a take-home vehicle. This would be his personal vehicle, so he'd be responsible for getting new tires, paying insurance on it, maintaining the vehicle. The other one refers to certain staff members that the county deems is appropriate to have a take-home vehicle, and we're working on that right now.
Okay, and then I think prior to you being here, there was a one-time conversation that then we found out that wasn't going to work, of $10,000, and then I believe there was another prior to you being here. So it just seems that I'm not clear with the codes how this is applying, and if we do agree to doing this, I think that we don't have the code that would cover that.
It would be the Trinity County Code 2.56.04A, which is the one that the board in the past has created the ordinance that allows the Director of Transportation to have a take-home vehicle. So that's what it's being relied on.
Okay, so that just deals with in taking it home, the county vehicle, correct?
Well, it just says a vehicle, it doesn't say county vehicle.
Okay, but there's nothing in there about the financial reimbursement of anything, the IRS codes, or, I mean, you can't even tell if that's a personal vehicle, or, I just think it's really vague, and I don't know if it's applicable.
It could be improved on. I would agree with you on that. It is a little vague, but it does give you the right to do what you're doing today, which is to provide a take-home vehicle being a personal vehicle with compensation reimbursement. It does, because it doesn't specifically say it has to be a county vehicle or paid for by the county. As with the process of renewing and reviewing these, I think that would be one that would be reviewed as well, just to make sure that it's accurately reflecting what's currently happening in the county, and making sure that the language would apply. So I will put that on our list as well to review.
Anything further, Bobby? Or?
No, I feel like if we pass it, then we're in violation of our code because it's not clear. And so would it be proper to pass it and then retrofit it, or should we have the right code articulating it correctly and then pass it? I don't know.
It's your pleasure how you want to proceed. You have the authority under the way the code is currently written to do what is being requested today. But again, it's your pleasure how you want to proceed.
Okay, so I have one question. So this is, if he drives 10 miles or 20,000 miles, it doesn't matter, he gets the 545.
Correct.
Getting around it to 550 and making like this.
I can, whatever the pleasure of the board is, yes, I can. I can round it down
Hopefully
to,
it will be legal.
I can round it down to 540 if I like.
How about 0?
Okay. Yes,
I
John.
just my light. I'm trying to remember what I was going to ask. How is it coming along with bringing everyone else into alignment with this?
We're moving forward on that. We're having to review, having personnel and then work, if it's more than just Department of Transportation, we're having to review each of the job classifications to see which one warrants. We just, for example, our general services manager, just grateful for them, so I'm going to have to bring that back to the board because he's called out quite often on weekends, so for him to have a take-home vehicle is appropriate too, but that's not in our ordinance at this point, so we're going to have to review all of the...
How far out do you think we are?
Can you stick to the item?
Well, you got me, but it has a tendency to make me not want to, if we're not still on track with bringing everybody into alignment,
I believe you stated that
we are on track, and I kind of wonder how long that's going to be. That was my next question, but I will.
Longer than it should.
No, I'm just shutting up.
All right, any other questions?
Yeah.
Anybody from the audience have a
Angie Bethel, Auditor Controller. So I have no issue whatsoever with the vehicle allowance. It's totally allowed by law, as that was said. But I'd like to refer back to the county code where I believe this ties into Rick Tippett's vehicle allowance he's requesting. So I've been working with Mr. Tippett for over 2 years on getting his employees into compliance with our existing county code. I know that there's a new policy going to be adopted, but this is the code that we are to go by. He currently has 5 employees commuting in county vehicles. Only 1 was approved by the board through the grievance process. So he has 4.
Angie, I'm going to do the same thing to you, is just keep it focused to this item.
So my question is, why would you as a board want to approve giving him something that is, he's already in compliance for a county vehicle and not require him to bring his employees into compliance? Because I worked on it for 2 years, and this is the last time I'm going to bring it up, because I'm tired of beating my head against a wall. Thank you.
My question is, how much insurance does he have to have? Because when my children went to Junction City School, we drove children, you know, if you go to school there and you drive other people's children, you have to have a $3 million policy. My question is, what policy are you requiring him to have to cover people who ride in his vehicle?
Okay, any other comments?
Katie Graves from Lewiston. I'm really curious why this is so important, why this has to be coming back. It seems simple enough and straightforward. In the code, it reads that he may have a vehicle to take home. It's not a shall. He can have one at his, that he can use on a 24-hour basis. That's in there also. I don't understand why we're doing the private vehicle. We're making it convoluted, making it hard. He can have he's driving a vehicle right now. I'm pretty sure he didn't walk here. He has a county vehicle that is at his disposal, and apparently he doesn't have staff. So there should be those vehicles he could use also. You bring into all the liability and all the pain and suffering, and I mean, why? He can have a county vehicle and he could use it for county business. And if you want to, he can drive it home and back to work. I mean, that's already in your code. You don't need an ordinance for it. You don't have to go through all this rigmarole. There doesn't have to be the IRS stuff and yada yada. And I don't understand why this is so important that it has to come back 3 times and it's been buggered up from the beginning. So just keep it simple. County vehicle, if you wanted to be able to take it home, great. Other than that, you know, you don't have to worry about all those other nuances for absolutely no reason. There's plenty of other county employees that would love to have the convenience of driving home and doing this and doing that. The transportation director and his other duties, he's not an ambulance driver. Let's just say that. They're not that big of an emergency. He's not out there actually, you know, when the road's disappearing, he's not out there stopping it. He might be on the phone. This isn't an ambulance driver kind of situation, and I don't see why you can't just take it back to the basics, county vehicle, and let him take it home if you want.
Anybody else from the public? All right, Ms. Morris, you had a question.
I did. That's not on video, Rick. Good question on the liability. What are we required for?
Shelley's in the audience, and ask her to show up there. She would be required to.
I have 2 questions, and I'll wait.
Good morning. It's not $3 million. It is basically what California requires, and I don't know off the top of my head what that dollar amount is, but I can get to it in a moment. You just have to have what California Vehicle Code requires you
Just
to
for our
carry.
regular? So
Correct.
I guess, I think a member of the public was trying to drive at, no pun intended. You know, he's working, using the vehicle. Does the county is liable for or at risk for future being brought into court, I think is where they were kind of driving at.
If an employee is operating their personal vehicle in the scope of their work, their personal vehicle is liable for 100% of that unless someone sues the county.
Right. Okay.
Then there could be an exposure.
A good clarification.
If it's awarded, correct.
Right, that's right, thank you.
Shelley, let me follow up on that. So that would be no different than any of our supervisors here that we get reimbursed for traveling to an event?
Correct, any employee.
Right.
Because California Vehicle Code follows the vehicle owner.
That's right.
So if we got in a wreck, if I'm driving down, then the county has some exposure if I...
Of course.
My second question, could we have you look into the issue that, separate from this issue, what Auditor Bickle raised, you and Margaret and Angie and Rick can get this figured out?
Yeah, on October 2nd, we were directed to review this and move forward and report back to the board within the year. So we are doing that and we will expedite it.
Yes, please, thank you.
Any other questions? I'd entertain a motion, if the board pleases.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? I will say, for the question of why, it's pretty easy. It says $10,000 a year savings.
Not including the actual purchase of a new vehicle. I mean, as a steward of government funds, we weighed it out, and the purchase of a new vehicle would cost minimum $40,000 to $45,000. And we still retain all the same liabilities of him driving that vehicle, as opposed to this running around $7,000 a year with no more exposure.
All right, with that, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, on to 4.3, Supervisors Meetings Calendar for 2019. I'll have a little colored up map here.
Thank you, Tina.
We need to make some corrections,
There's a couple of them.
Oh, okay. I guess there's a correction on the second page, and now we left Tina. Familiar with it.
On the second page, my January 2nd meeting is not listed on that page. And then also we should take off the July 2nd.
The July, which one?
July 2nd.
Okay, thank you.
And then change the July 16th to the July 17th.
The one, this one, yeah, this page. Okay.
So that everything's correct on the map.
Yeah, the map is correct.
The calendar.
PowerPoint for you.
You have engineering.
No, I'm not smart enough.
Neither are engineers. Quote me on that one.
Okay, and those were the three changes? Any comments or thoughts by the board before we go to public questions?
No.
All right, we'll open it up to public comment on any potential thoughts. Jeremy, you got any thoughts?
Looking forward to it.
Okay, we're looking forward to you to be here. Okay, back to us.
I move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, 4.4, approve a master memorandum of understanding with Trinity County Deputy Sheriff's Association.
Good morning. Shelley Nelson, HR Director.
Good afternoon.
Is it?
Yeah, I know, we need new battery.
Is it out? Okay, so the last or latest, I guess, bargaining unit for the Deputy Sheriff's Association, I'm going to refer to them as DSA if that's okay for the rest of this. It had expired a year ago, December 31st, 2017. We had entered in negotiations back in November, the end of November 2017, and had met several times. We had brought an agreement in concept to you back on June 11th, 2018, which you had accepted and directed us to create an MOU, which we did and presented to the DSA. During the summer, the DSA, most of that membership was quite affected by the emergencies through the summer and whatnot. So here we are several months later, they finally had membership approve it. The major provision is very brief and simple. It is a 12-month agreement retroing back to January 1st of 18 to expire at the end of this month, which would be a full year. And they'd accepted 2% in salary increases retroing back to July 1st, 2018.
Questions? Any questions thoughts from the audience? Nope, okay, come back.
Motion. Second.
Morrison, Finley? All right, all those in favor, this is, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. All right, closed session. 5.1, Government Code Section 54954, conference with legal counsel pending litigation, case 1. Government Code Section 54954.5, employee evaluation, county administrative office. And the subsequent, okay, Government Code Section 54954.5, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation. You thought it was a pending litigation.
That was so
Any public comment on any of those?
That's it, Rick, the play instruction here.
Okay, we're reporting out of closed session. We have 3 items, and each item direction was given to staff. Meeting adjourned.